Victor Conte, the infamous man behind the Balco steroid scandal, has served his time and has now reinvented himself once again. As we pick up the action here in the Big Apple, New York City, we find Conte advising and educating boxing's current bantamweight champion of the world, Nonito Donaire. Watch and learn as Conte explains the various techniques and supplements he uses on the man they call the Filipino Flash. We're here at the Athenia Manhattan Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. I am here with the one, the only Victor Conte in this beautiful suite he's got here. Victor, the suites in New York City are not quite as elaborate as the suites in Las Vegas are they?
No, they're not. And generally, our favorite place to stay is at the Plaza at the South End.
That's right. That's where you always stay.
But the entire team. This is where the top-ranked headquarters is for Nonito. So he's here, and that's where the whole team is at.
That's what we're here for. We're here to see your guy, Nonito Donaire, fight, defend his title at Madison Square Garden at the theater right across the street, by the way, which is very convenient. You're in my neck of the woods now, New York, and what? Give me a little background on how you got involved with helping fighters, because everyone always knows of you as the guy who helped all the track athletes back in the Balco era. You kind of were out of the game a little bit. You're back in the game, and you've been really instrumental in helping several boxers, from Berto to Nonito Donaire, who seems to be the newest Filipino, I guess you could say.
Star on the rise.
Star on the rise, exactly. Give us a little background on how you got involved with him.
The first boxer I worked with was Shane Mosley, who, as you know, a while back fought against Manny Pacquiao. And of course, that was pre-Balco raid. That was back in 2003, before his third fight with Oscar De La Hoya. And of course, that involved some other types of substances other than the perfectly legal products.
Those are back in the good old days, and no one knew anything, right?
And so that was the first guy that I worked with. And thereafter, in 2009, I worked a couple of fights with Andre Ward, who's the super middleweight champion. He's scheduled to fight here in this upcoming Super 6 Showtime final coming up. He actually got an eye injury and now scheduled for December 17th. But I worked a couple of fights with him. And then last year, I basically bumped into Nonito Donaire at the bank.
He lives in your area?
He lives in our area. He's from right over the San Mateo Bridge there in San Lorenzo. He was born in the Philippines, and then he went to high school in San Lorenzo there in the Bay Area. And it's his wife Rachel and her parents, and she grew up on the peninsula. And so they live in San Mateo, and I live in San Mateo. And I'd actually never heard of Nonito, and I don't think Nonito had ever heard of me.
I didn't know who Victor was. I thought he was just a very smart man.
Right. And when I walked into the bank that day, he had his Filipino Flash van outside. And I saw, world champions, had pictures of him.
And I guess he walked out of the bank and, saw my van out there, and he inquired who the Filipino Flash was. I mean, there was no name, no last name.
Because you had it on the van.
It was on the van.
So I walked in and walked up to the table and was filling out a deposit slip, and the manager of the bank named Alex was sitting with Nonito, and so he got up and walked around and said, "Nonito, this is Victor. Victor, this is Nonito."
I walked in the bank, and he walks in the bank. I was talking to the bank manager about the Mosley Mayweather fight, and Victor started talking about all this stuff that Mosley's doing, and it's the high altitude and all that stuff, and the recovery and all this scientific stuff.
We talked a little bit there at the bank, and we knew we had some common people. My daughter Veronica had actually trained with Mike Basil, who is his strength and conditioning coach.
Sure.
And so she'd been to the boxing gym, Undisputed Boxing, there where Nonito trains in San Carlos. And so we agreed to meet the following day at the boxing gym. We had a meeting there right outside the gym, and then the following day he went and got his blood collected and came to our offices, which is a couple blocks down from the boxing gym, and started with his intermittent hypoxic training program. And we've been working closely for about a year and a half.
Out of the blue, he comes out and he talks about all these things, and I'm like...
He was talking about stuff you had no idea about, because you weren't even doing stuff.
Hemoglobin? What was that? What are you talking about, Victor? I'm like, red blood cells. I'm like, okay, I have some. I'm, and testing and all this iron and zinc, and I'm like, dude, you lost me at zinc, or you lost me at what?
Are you shocked that here you got a guy who's the champion of the world at bantamweight, and the guy doesn't know anything about nutrition, basically? Is it amazing?
I think that's the good news, and that he didn't know. However, once people saw us talking in the bank, and of course he's told this story later, and I said, okay, see you later, and I left. And then, of course, Nonito, when he walked out to go get in his vans, apparently some people came up to him and said,
"Stay away from that guy."
You know who that guy is? Are you gonna work with the devil here? And
right.
So these are very smart people, Nonito and his wife Rachel, and of course they knew that, and because we discussed that I had previously worked with Andre Ward,
right.
and they've known each other since they were 10, 11, 12 years old. They came up through the amateurs together, right. So they called. Rachel called and talked with Andre and kind of got his feedback and input. And Nonito's just that kind of guy that
he didn't care.
He judged me based upon who I was and what I had to say and his own individual opinion of me, and not so much that this guy is some bad person that you should stay away from. And so they talked it over, and after we had that meeting, they decided that they felt that the benefits potentially would be worth any stigma that would be attached to him for the association.
But it must have been intriguing for you.
It was very intriguing because he explained about recovery. He explained about getting the body into its best possible shape, and just just the overall getting back into performing 100%, or more. And I was intrigued, and I talked to my wife. My wife was right next to us, and she kind of understood what Victor was talking about. So we talked, and Victor gave me supplements like ZMA, Arobatine, and Vitalize, and all that stuff that I use for training.
Sure.
and at night.
When the media obviously got a hold of him and started asking him, "Oh, you're working with Victor Conte," and I'm sure there was a lot of questions being asked. How did he handle that, and do you feel that he handled it well? I thought he did.
I think he handled it very well. He's a very direct kid, and he just said, listen, you've got a needle, I've got a vein. You come test me anytime, and I got nothing to hide. I'm clean, and I've always been clean. So there's really, people are worried about this association, and he believes, like I do, that people are beginning to realize that these fighters that are working with me and other athletes, MMA and these are likely the cleanest guys in boxing.
And I went to my guy from Nevada, got it checked, to see what it was. Because at the time when I was meeting Victor, guys were telling me, dude.
You think he's slipping drugs into you?
Yeah, it's like, dude, they're telling that this guy's that guy, all about this Bonko stuff, and they're telling me about, dude, if you're going to go with him, you're signing yourself to the devil. So I'm like,
you like that though, right?
I'm like, I'm a nice guy,
Yeah.
I don't ever judge a guy. I mean, when I talked to Victor, he was very knowledgeable. He was very intelligent. And when I talked to him, of course we had kind of like a standoff, like, I don't know what kind of stuff this is, but,
right.
When we got it checked and all that stuff, that it was just pretty much,
supplements.
Supplements that your body uses, that your body needs to increase focus, energy, and just the overall training effect and performance, right?
Well, people don't realize that there's a lot of power behind nutrition and knowledge and eating properly that boxers are kind of not privy to. This is more of like a bodybuilding fitness world. Even the track athletes know a lot more than they do. And now the boxing world is kind of getting turned on to this. Do you feel that there is a big segment missing the boat, so to speak? Because there's a lot of old-fashioned techniques that they still use in boxing, it seems.
And they believe it's mind over matter for the most part. I mean, I'm relatively new to the game, but I have worked with several world champions, and the same thing that I saw with Nonito initially, I saw with Andre Berto, which is these guys typically train the standard boxing approach, and Zab Judah's another one that is a former world champion. 6 days a week and 2 3-hour sessions a day.
And they run like 8 miles,
they just
like a distance runner, right?
They do all this morning road work, and I started looking at how these guys do what they do, and from a scientific standpoint, many of these methods just make no sense. As an example, it got popular with Oscar De La Hoya and Shane Mosley to train at Big Bear, which is high altitude training, about 7,000 feet. Well, as soon as I looked at the science and I saw, Well, why would you ever want to do this if you're an explosive strength and speed and power athlete? Because, you know, when you're up at elevation like that, your heart rate when you're trying to go to sleep is probably 15, 20 beats faster, and you go into a catabolic state. So
the body has to work harder.
You lose muscle mass, you lose power, and you lose speed. Now, it may help some of these guys, you know, with their stamina and endurance, the oxygen uptake and utilization benefits. However, you can do that through using a hypoxicator and a mask and train at sea level and sleep at sea level and get a deep and restful sleep. And then the more I thought about it, I said, well, not only is this dumb in the world of boxing, but think about this. They founded the United States Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs at 7,000 feet.
Yeah.
So you get some benefit, but why would you want to sleep at an altitude that actually doesn't allow, you know, reduces the level of your anabolic hormone production?
So, right. This is a good point you're making. So actually, you know, and just in our world of physique athletes, it's probably not good for.
We actually have all these boxers and other athletes wear what's called a memory belt, and we collect 7 different physiological parameters. So all the way down to the number of breaths they take, the VO2 max, the heart rate, caloric expenditure, on and on and on. And you can actually see the cycles. Typically, you go through about 3 different cycles that have 5 stages, and you want stage 3 and 4, which is also called delta or slow wave sleep, which is where your heart rate is the lowest
and you recover the most.
You want the amount of time and the depth is when the physical healing and tissue repair is maximized. Everybody gets confused, but that's called delta or slow wave sleep. And then during the 5th cycle, which is REM sleep, as everybody calls it, rapid eye movement sleep, and that's when you notice your dreams. Well, that's when you're enhancing your cognitive function.
That's really not recovering the body.
That's not recovering the body. So you'll go through these approximately 3 cycles in a night, and we could look at, you know, we give them ZMA and his capsule form and as even the powder form, and you can see that the amount and the depth of the stage 3, stage 4 sleep, slow wave sleep, is enhanced. And what does this do about 90 minutes after you go to sleep? This is when 70% approximately of your own body's endogenous growth hormone is produced in a single burst, a single mass. Okay? So if that's the case, why would you want to live somewhere? And there's many other factors, temperature, light, sound, all these other things that can affect and reduce the amount of growth hormone your body sleeps. Then the second half of sleep is when your testosterone is produced. This is why guys wake up with a woody, and they'd rather have sex because your testosterone level in the morning is double what it is in the evening throughout the day. So I started realizing, wow, this is not only the case in boxing, but look at all these Olympic athletes. Why would the United States Olympic Committee build the Olympic Training Center at a location?
So what you're saying is you can get the hypoxic effects of being at altitude by using masks and doing other things at sea level. You don't need to go to altitude and do it.
And not only that, but you can control the amount of oxygen that's in. So it'd be like being able to say, well, let's sleep here at 7,000 feet when we start, and then let's go to 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 22,000 feet. So sea level is about 21% oxygen, and you start out with an intermittent hypoxic training at about 15,000, but we can take it all the way down to 9%, which is a simulated of about 22,000 foot.
Is there a benefit to sleeping in an oxygen chamber? Hyper-oxygenating your body at night?
You can use both, of course. The more oxygen that you can deliver. And after this training, most people, you'll see that their blood oxygen saturation is about 98%. But after preparing for a fight like this with athletes like Nonito, we see he's got 100% oxygen saturation now.
Wow, that's amazing.
So and where does this serve him?
Do you attribute that to also the supplementation that you have him on, as far as nutritional supplements? Because you mentioned to me that most of these guys are all iron deficient.
Research now is showing 2010 September European study that they had 99 elite sportsmen. They called 43% were iron deficient. They had very low serum ferritin levels,
which is obviously
so it's very common.
Endurance.
And imagine, in track athletes they call it foot strike hemolysis from pounding your feet on the ground. Your red blood cells are a combination of young, middle-aged, and older. The more older, fragile red blood cells, when you're pounding your feet, those get broken down. Well, imagine there you go with contact sport. So and if you don't have, and whether you're using EPO or whatever you're doing, adapting through intermittent hypoxic training or regular hypoxic training, if you don't give the building block nutrients, your system cannot produce more red blood cells.
Well,
and iron is the primary ingredient. There's others involved in regulation and the clotting factor and
some of the nutritional products that you do have Nonito on, because I think that our viewership is interested out there. I think that some of the other maybe boxes might take note and say, hey, I better be on this too. Obviously, it's how you apply it and setting up in terms of scheduling is very important as well. But we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to take a break, though. We got to go down to the weigh-in and see what's going on and see if your guy makes weight. I know you got some interesting techniques of how to dehydrate, how to rehydrate, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit.